So you might be wondering why we're at the courthouse today. Well, Nick did her meditation yesterday from the farm, and she did a great job with it, and it involved the farm animals, and it was really fun. The problem is I'm kind of a competitive person, and so I wanted to one-up her. But this was her idea to come to the courthouse, so I don't know that this really counts. Now, when you get married in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to come to the courthouse to get a license to get married. And then at the end of the service, typically the pastor will say, "And now by the power vested in me and by the state of Pennsylvania, I pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride." The interesting thing is that everybody is paying attention to the kiss. But have you ever wondered about this authority that the state has in regards to marriage? So we are on a journey to the cross with Jesus this week. We are doing everything completely different. It began on Sunday with Palm Sunday and Jesus coming into Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives with the crowds surrounding him, throwing their cloaks and palm branches on the ground before him. And then Monday, Jesus will come into Jerusalem once again, this time from the town of Bethany, where Martha and Mary and Lazarus lived. And he will come across a fig tree, which Nicole unpacked for us in the meditation yesterday. If you haven't had a chance to see that or look at that meditation, then go to our website. Underneath the tab Daily, you will find a link for that meditation. It was a really good one. At the end of the day, or at some point on Monday, Jesus will enter the temple courts and he will overturn the tables of the money changers. He will proclaim, "My house was meant to be a house of prayer and not this den of robbers that you have made it to be." It's not this place of business. But in doing that, what he did was he really agitated and irritated the leaders in Israel. This was their house, and he had come into it and basically turned it into a mess. So he goes back to Bethany on Monday night, and now on Tuesday morning we are walking with Jesus once again to the cross. If we turn to the Gospel of Matthew, this is what Matthew tells us. So from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verse 23. Jesus entered the temple courts, and while he was teaching, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him. "By what authority are you doing these things?" they asked. "And who gave you this authority?" Jesus replied, "I will also ask you one question. If you answer me, I will tell you by what authority I am doing these things. John's baptism, where did it come from? Was it from heaven or was it from men?" They discussed this amongst themselves and said, "If we say from heaven," he will ask, "then why didn't you believe him? But if we say from men, we are afraid of the people, for they all hold that John was a prophet." Now it's interesting, Luke will add here this idea that what they were afraid of was actually the people stoning them. It's an interesting thought. Going on here. So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." And then he said, "Neither then will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." Authority. It's this really interesting question that they raised. What authority is Jesus using to do all the things that he is doing? Jesus, in this way that only Jesus does, when he is asked a question like this, what he often does is fires a question back at them. And the question he is asking regarding John's baptism is actually a question about fear. He's trying to get at what's behind the motivation for the leaders in Israel. And so what he's saying is who do you fear? Do you fear God or do you fear men? There's this interesting moment earlier in the gospel where Jesus is with the crowds and he warns them and he says, "Be careful of those in leadership." We are not called to fear those who can kill the body, but to fear the one who, after the body has been killed, can destroy the soul as well. Jesus is saying we should not fear men. But the leaders in Israel don't get that. They're more afraid of the people than they are of God, and we see that in their answer to Jesus. Now, the day will go on, and Jesus has a whole bunch of teachings. He is telling parable after parable: parable of the two sons, parable of the tenants, the parable of the wedding banquets. He will go on to talk about taxes and where do we pay our taxes, and the resurrection. What the greatest commandment is. It's actually a long day filled with all sorts of teachings. You will find those in Matthew chapters 22 and 23 and 24. At the end of the day, he will take the disciples and they will head back towards Bethany. And on the way, one of the disciples will note the temple and how magnificent it is. And at that point, Jesus is going to turn to them and he is going to say, the temple and everything that it is about to come to an end. That this age of the temple is about to conclude. Because the temple no longer has God's approval. It no longer has the authority that God had intended for it to have. Everything is about to change. And that's what happens on Tuesday of Holy Week. Again, as we are journeying with Jesus to the cross. So thank you for joining us.